Warren Buffett said that if you want to make money and you're a small investor, it's really easy to do that. But then if you're sort of like him, in charge of a very large firm, it can be much harder to figure out a good way to deliver a return on investment. And the reason for that is because if I take my entire net worth and I go buy a stock of choice, whatever that may be, I'm not going to probably impact the share price. I'm not going to buy out the company. But if a really large institution puts all of their money into a small company, they potentially would wind up buying it out in its entirety, or they would dramatically manipulate the price of the stock just because they bought so much of it. So for a big organization, you can't really do the same strategies as what you would do if you're an individual with a much smaller amount of money. And to take that and apply it to life, I think about how sometimes we go through times when we do something that works for us, and then we fail to realize that we have to change our strategy as life stages come to us. So for example, let's say I have a friend who has a little kid, and the kid will go to his mother and say, hey, can I have $1 for something? And then he'll go to his dad and say, hey, can I have $1 for that same thing? And he has swindled his parents because now he got $2 because mom didn't know that dad gave little Johnny $1 already, so she gives him $1, and then now he has 2, right? Well, you know, something like that is probably more cute than anything else. It's not really a bad thing. The little kid managed to get ahead by doing a little bit of a hustle. But what happens if you take that same attitude, that same desire to sort of cheat to get ahead, and then you apply that in a more adult situation? What if it was a corporation or a high-level executive that's cheating in order to get ahead for business results? Well, then it's illegal. It's very dangerous, and it's potentially career-ending for the person who cuts those corners. The point I'm getting at is it's not really a big deal when a 6-year-old's doing it. It is a big deal when it's an adult doing it. So as we go through life, what's important is that we sort of reevaluate ourselves and say, okay, there's certain things that I've done in the past which aren't necessarily bad. It's not that I'm looking back over my life and saying, well, here's a big list of all the things I shouldn't have ever done. Sometimes those things helped us. We got ahead. We got to where we are because of the choices that we've made. Whether you think they're perfect or not, they've served us to get us where we are. But those aren't necessarily the things that we need to be using as our main tools for guiding our future. It could be changing your attitude toward life. It could be changing what kind of media you consume. It could be changing your routines so that you're more focused on your health. It could be focusing on gratitude to people instead of being cynical or critical of them. It could be a lot of different things, but really, when you look at life and realize that success looks different for each season, then it becomes really important to have a debrief, to look over every day and say, you know, what am I doing today that maybe I need to change for tomorrow. I have a list of things I try to do every day. I try to, read a book for a little while, journal for a little while, things like that. One of my big things that I wanted to challenge myself on was to avoid saying or propagating negative talk about other people, because it's so easy to have some kind of water cooler gossip, nothing really extremely nefarious. You're just kind of talking crap about somebody, and it's not really edifying. It's just tempting to do. And that's something I've been working to cut out of my life. But what occurred to me is that there's a lot of things that I try to do every day that are all about an action, right? If I said I want to make a point to sit down and read an article in a news magazine for at least 15 minutes every day, well, that's a really attainable thing. I can measure it. But if I said, well, my goal is to not have negative thoughts about people or not say negative things about people, well, that's a lot harder to measure, isn't it? Like, how do I know if I really went through my day with entirely pure thoughts? How do I know if I spoke in the right ways all the time? It's kind of a shade of gray, right? Like, what is the difference between talking about somebody and gossiping about somebody? Because that's kind of a fine line, right? It really depends on where it's coming from and why, what's your motive and stuff like that. But what it made me realize is it's not about saying, here's the things I'm not going to say anymore, right? It's about saying, what am I going to focus on? So instead of saying I'm not going to talk bad about people, I thought, wouldn't it be better to say I'm going to make a point every day to keep a gratitude journal and make a point to consciously take pen and put the ink on paper to say things that I'm thankful for, and to meditate on positive things deliberately. It's not about chasing the darkness out of your life. It's about letting the curtains be opened up so the light can come in. Same thing working on health goals. So maybe the goal is to eat better or to do things that are going to be better for my health. And it's not about saying, I'm never going to go to McDonald's again. It's not saying, if I'm out with friends, that I'm not going to go have a hearty meal at a restaurant or something, right? It's more saying, well, what are the things that I am going to do, right? I'm going to focus on maybe fasting one day out of the week. I'm going to focus on, having that salad, or, embracing, foods that are lower in carbs or something like that, The point is, it's a lot better to say you're adding in a routine than it is to present this whole idea of you're just going to cut something out. You're not going to do something. When you say you're not going to do something, you're limiting yourself. You're kind of closing yourself in and walling off an area that is prohibited. But when you embrace things that are positive, then that's a net addition to your life. You're not giving up something, you're adding something. You're not sacrificing the darkness by letting in the light. You're not destroying the darkness. You're just allowing the light in, and the darkness will vanish on its own within reason when you let in the light. But we can't do that unless we focus on self-reflection. We shouldn't be critical of ourselves to be condemning. We shouldn't look and say, my goodness, if my life would have just worked out better or different, if I would have just done something different, I'd feel better about myself. We should never be hard on ourselves in that way. We should always be willing to forgive ourselves. But even that kind of is problematic, because if you say you're going to forgive yourself, that implies that you really need forgiveness, and you really don't. You just need to look at the future with an understanding that you aren't constrained to apply the same rules for tomorrow that you applied for yesterday. And if you know that, then you're free to practice change in your life as you go. And you can also say you're glad for the decisions you have made. You're glad for the blessings that have been in your life. You just are aware that to bring more blessings into your life and to follow the path that you're meant to follow, the future is going to inevitably require a different set of tools and a different strategy. I was reading a book called Extreme Ownership. It was about Navy SEALs. They spent time in combat, and then after they got out of a war zone, they'd have to go back and do a recap and a debrief and make a PowerPoint presentation about what happened out in the field. And they said it's really hard to do that because when you're tired and you've been in combat and things like that, the last thing you really want to do is office work. And yet they said that's an important part of the mission. Maybe it's even the most important part, because if you don't stop to take stock of where you're at, to analyze what worked and what didn't, and to use that knowledge as a determination for future missions, you don't learn, you don't grow. And then potentially you could be putting your lives and the lives of others at risk because you're not learning from each experience. So make sure that you do take time to have a debrief, to reflect, to analyze your thoughts, and to ponder what is working, what is not working, and what worked before, but it's not necessarily the best way moving forward. As always, wherever you find yourself, good luck on your adventure, and till next time, thanks so much for watching.